The morning it happened, the driveway felt smaller than it ever had before. I stood there with my coffee going cold in my hands, staring at a silver SUV parked exactly where my car should have been. Snow from the night before still hugged the tires, as if the vehicle had settled in comfortably, like it belonged there. It didn't. That driveway was the one thing that had always been mine in this tightly packed Canadian townhouse complex, a narrow strip of concrete I paid for, shoveled myself, and relied on every single day. And yet, there it was. Someone else's car, blocking my life before my day had even begun. I knocked on doors first. I always did things the polite way. In Canada, that's almost instinct. Apologize first, even when you're wronged. I walked through the cold halls of the complex, asking neighbors if they knew whose car it was. Most avoided eye contact. A few shrugged. One elderly man whispered that it belonged to the HOA representative who was inspecting units that morning. I called the HOA office. Straight to voicemail. I emailed. Automated reply. I waited, standing in the cold, watching the minutes tick by as my phone buzzed with messages from my boss asking why I wasn't at work yet. An hour passed. Then two. My boss wasn't sympathetic anymore. I could feel that familiar knot in my chest, the one that comes from feeling powerless. I had moved to this neighborhood believing in community, rules, fairness. That's what homeowners associations were supposed to represent. Order, respect. Instead, it felt like a reminder that power often sits with those who think rules apply only downward. When the HOA representative finally showed up, she didn't apologize. She barely looked at me. She said she was authorized to park wherever necessary while performing her duties. I told her this was my driveway, my legal property. She smiled in a way that felt practiced and said, "You can file a complaint." Then she walked away, heels crunching on ice, leaving her car exactly where it was. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the conversation over and over, wondering why it hurt so much. It wasn't just about the driveway. It was about being dismissed. About being made to feel small in a place I worked so hard to call home. My wife listened quietly as I talked it through, her hand resting on mine. She didn't tell me what to do. She just reminded me that standing up for yourself doesn't always have to be loud, but it does have to be firm. The next morning, I checked the property survey again. Everything was clear. The driveway was mine. I called a contractor I'd used years ago when we renovated our backyard. I asked him a question that made him pause. Then he laughed softly and said, "If it's your land, and you've got the permits, you can build whatever boundary you want." Permits took a few days. During that time, the car stayed. The HOA office ignored my emails. Neighbors watched silently. Some nodded in quiet support. Others looked nervous, like they didn't want to be seen taking sides. When the permits were approved, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Resolve. The concrete truck arrived early on a gray morning. The HOA representative's car was still there. When she came running out, shouting, telling them to stop, it was already too late. I stood there, calm but shaking, as the forms went up. I told her she could move the car anytime. She said she was calling her lawyer. I told her she was free to do so. The concrete poured slowly, steadily, boxing the car in on all sides, leaving enough space so it wasn't damaged, but making one thing very clear. It wasn't going anywhere. The story spread fast. Phones came out. Someone filmed. By afternoon, the HOA president showed up, red-faced and furious. But the documents were solid. The permits were valid. The land was mine. For once, there was nothing they could threaten me with. It took 3 days before they agreed, in writing, to acknowledge the driveway as private property, issue a formal apology, and update their parking enforcement rules. Only then did I agree to remove the wall. When the car finally drove away, the driveway looked bigger than it ever had before. What surprised me most wasn't the victory. It was how many neighbors thanked me quietly afterward. How many admitted they'd been pushed around in small ways for years. That concrete wall wasn't just around a car. It was around a line that had been crossed too many times. Sometimes, standing up for yourself doesn't mean yelling or fighting. Sometimes it means knowing your rights, staying calm, and being willing to follow through. In a world where people with authority often forget the humanity of those they govern, one quiet act of resolve can remind everyone that respect goes both ways. And every time I park in my driveway now, I don't just see concrete. I see proof that even in the coldest moments, dignity is worth defending.